I feel the same that Nigel does. I mean, you know, Tina spent a lot of years running her theater company and directing, so she didn't do a lot of acting, and then she went back to acting, and I think she was so hungry for that and grateful to be able to be doing it, and that she really just dove in and wanted to be an actor. And so she takes her director hat off and her writer hat, even as the sort of the main writer of this piece, she takes that hat off. And even her Shakespeare scholar hat off most of the time, and we are in the room working, and she just is open to a full collaboration, and so she's actually fantastic to work with in that way.
It's just hard to get her to shut up sometimes.
Yeah, and not forget things I want her to do. But it's great.
Thank you. Festival in Boulder, Colorado. Tina Packer directed Nigel as Richard III, which I think she mentioned. And I'm wondering, after that experience of playing Richard III, did it change the way you played the Richard Elizabeth scene in Women of Will?
No, actually. The one that we did in Colorado was very, very different. You know, I mean, the thing about all these scenes is that, I mean, there is an arc to Women of Will, and there are certain things that we need to pick out and pick up, and so it's not that things become domesticated, but you know, it's very different doing a scene, you know, without the entire, you know, tidal momentum of the rest of the play. You know, so by the time you know, Richard gets to Elizabeth, you know, in the play, and you know, you just played it yourself, the stakes are enormously high. And it's not that they're not high in this scene, but it's more a question of how Elizabeth negotiates, how she deals with it, you know, because at this point, this is the warrior women from violence to negotiation, and Elizabeth is, you know, she's such a brilliant negotiator. And we see how different she is with Edward in that scene and with Richard in that scene. So yeah, I think there's probably less danger in this one. Or at least there was now.
I just asked Nigel if playing Richard in Colorado with you has changed how you approach the Richard Elizabeth scene here, so that's what we were talking about.
Yeah, he bloody well cut out another chunk again.
I was getting tired, I was running out of steam.
Well, that's, I guess, the wonderful thing, since you're the creator of the play. In the moment, you can just sort of make some edits on the fly and change things around. Tina, I'm wondering if you can briefly tell people here in the audience what they might expect from part 2.
Yes. You heard this kind of spiritual sexual language, which is in the sonnet. And so what happens now is that Shakespeare's... The sonnet that we did at the end of the play. Shakespeare now really almost, well, begins in Love's Labour's Lost, but in Romeo and Juliet completely transforms the way he writes about women. He stops projecting on them and he writes from the inside of them. And women suddenly become as powerful, and we follow the nuance of their thought and their feeling. And Romeo and Juliet's an equal play. So we look at the sexual, spiritual plays that come immediately after this and see this merging, and it transforms his writing. So we're going into this very intense period for Shakespeare. It's the period of the sonnets as well, as we see what happens to him as he shifts his thinking almost entirely about who women are.
And we look at Romeo and Juliet, Beatrice and Benedict for Much Ado, Antony and Cleopatra, and Troilus and Cressida.
And other bits and pieces.
A couple little bits, but that's what we focus on it too.
So obviously, since you said this is mostly in chronological order, and you're looking at Antony, Cleopatra, and Troilus and Cressida, not in chronological order, obviously this merging of the sexual and the spiritual was something that was important and powerful to Shakespeare that he felt like he needed to return to.
Well, it's always in the plays on some level thereafter, but Antony and Cleopatra is his last major statement about it. And so that's why we include it and leap over to 1608, you know, much later.
And it's also, you know, the combination of things that are happening in his own life as well, which are reflected, we think, in the plays. So his own personal relationships, the difficulty thereof.
Yeah. and those he has to come and see. And Kevin especially has to come and see it.
Terrific.
The agility to jump from character to character and high stakes scene to different kinds of high stakes scene so quickly with especially you didn't even really take moments before explaining, you just kind of dove in, and how you found the ability.
Yes, yes. It's through practice. It's like flipping a switch. That's the only way I can describe it. Because you've struggled with it in rehearsal, but you've been building the brain waves, if I can put it, as we know more and more about neuroscience, we know more about how actors operate. And so once you've got the thinking pattern of your character and the connection between that and what's going on in the body, you can almost kind of program yourself to go, okay, this is this. And I'm in this situation, and you flip the switch, and then you completely believe that you're there. I don't even question it. But it's through the rehearsal process that you have to learn what the patterns are of your character, the thinking patterns.
It's a question for Nigel. In going through the male roles and how you transform your character, I'm curious as to that effect on your own side. Because you come out of one, after you've been murdered, there's this aside, which seems to come from your character about the humiliation. But then when you get to the sonnet, there's another transformation. And I'm curious whether at the end of doing this show, whether there is still a bit of hard wiring that feels, oh shit, she's, this is a women's thing and I've got to be equal, I've got to act out this stuff.
No, really good question. It does. It has affected me profoundly. It really does. And there's still that knee-jerk reaction. I mean, the hard wiring is exactly that. It just seems, that. Yeah, I've been in therapy and I've done all that stuff, and it's like putting a band-aid on an axe wound, you know what I mean? And so my hard wiring is my hard wiring, but I just don't act on it anymore. I will feel the impulse, and I think, having gone through this whole experience, and what's really important actually, that the crucial factor for me is that I have a daughter, and and when she was born, it was like, we want this girl to have a strong voice and a presence in the world. When she was about 13 or 14, I really began to regret it. But she's, but she's a major she is an influence, actually, both her and my son. And so I'm always I think I'm always distilling things, through her as well to a degree, and her presence in my life and how she is in the world, which is, incredible to watch. But you can't, if you come to see all 5 parts, you'll see where we get to at the end, and it's just impossible not to be affected and not to be changed in a very deep way, by playing all these roles. I think, I don't know, am I different? I'm not, am I really?
Your hard wiring's still there, but no, you are different, Nigel. You're really different. You're much more willing to say how you feel and what it is that you're seeing and thinking than you were in the beginning. You wouldn't do that. And over the years, you've really, you really now articulate a lot. And I feel as if you're not ashamed of articulating the man's point of view, because in a way the very fact that you're in Women of Will means that you're open to the idea that it doesn't have to be like that. And that, from my point of view, is enormously useful.
You see the complete contrast between Joan of Arc Mark I,
Yes.
very perceptive, and the ghost of G.B. Shaw ripping her off.
Yes.
And then she changes
Yes.
in the latter.
Yeah.
She's totally delusional.
Yes.
She can't even tell a decent line and get the story
Yes.
straight.
Yes.
Now, the whole of Henry VI seems disjointed, like it was put
Yes.
together by 2 or more. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are bits of Henry VI which really sound like Marlowe, specifically Richard Duke of York.
Right.
Yeah. Now, is it possible that the early, the late Joan of Arc
Yeah.
isn't Shakespeare at all? Marlowe never liked women.
Yes.
Personally or in his plays. Now, also, Shakespeare was into magic, and Marlowe was a rationalist. Do you think Joan of Arc marked towards Marlowe?
I think that that's very possible. I have my own theory. One of the great things about messing around in Shakespeare is that we all start getting our own version of actually what's going on.
Yeah.
So I absolutely concur that that is possible, and I certainly think the success of Tamburlaine gave him this desire to write the Henry VI plays. What I also think, though, is that I think Shakespeare started writing them at a very early age, long before he got into the theatre. And I think that, I forgot when the first translation of Holinshed came out, but I think that he was writing them when he was a kid in school, because it feels like those things that you do in school. You have battles and you fight, you're dead, no, I'm not dead, I'm going to get up and be alive. So I think that he was writing this for years, and then suddenly when Tamburlaine came out, he thought, my God, I really could write it, and found a way to do it and do it real fast. But I also think it's perfectly possible, that other people could have had a hand in it, any of those things. I think because it's in the folio, I think that we have to say that Shakespeare himself owned it as one of his plays, and that his fellow actors owned it as one of his plays. I also think it was perfectly possible that they were writing it. That they actually were having their say in the middle of it. And, it's what sells. It's like a Hollywood movie, this is what's selling this year, so let's do a bit of that, whether it makes deep psychological sense or not. And also, at that point, he was learning. I think it's through the Henry VI plays he learns about human behaviour. So even if he didn't write it all, he was taking it on. But my personal opinion is he started at 17 or something, 16. I don't think anybody else has ever said that. That's what I think.
What was the experience directing Tina Packer, a director herself? So,
Well,
were you influenced by her as a director?
well, first I seem to, every now and then, you direct other directors. I mean, you probably do too. You get other directors in your shows, and the nice thing is when to sort of just be an actor at that time. Everyone has their job to do. Although it is, of course, it's a collaboration. But the wonderful thing about being able to direct Tina is that on this subject, I mean, she's done all of these plays, and a lot of them many times, and so it's nice to have that deep perspective, and also the sort of, she looks at things, I think, much more philosophically, psychologically, than a lot deeper than a lot of people do, than most people do, certainly most directors, who most of the time are just looking at pictures, making pretty pictures. And it's rare to find one that can do both of those things. A great influence for me is the way she trains actors, the way she teaches actors is so valuable as a director in that way of working with them. And she finds these sort of great shortcuts at getting to very deep things in the play. I was working with Tina 4 years ago, and I saw the way she would train in her company, and that was really influential to me in the last 4 years.
And Eric is being an actor in Hamlet, so he's playing Laertes in Hamlet, so I'm directing.
So it's the first time I'm getting directed by her. So
Okay. So
we're paying each other back.
And I wanted to tell you along those lines, if you decide to take the journey with us of all 5 parts of Women of Will, I absolutely guarantee that you will have a much deeper, more profound understanding of Shakespeare. And so when you come back and see our full productions of Hamlet and As You Like It, Your appreciation of Ophelia and Gertrude and Rosamond and Celia and Phoebe and Audrey will be astonishing. And if you do not think that your life is better, I promise you I will personally give you the money for your ticket.